Man was driving on the hill, but now, when he wakes up from his coma, it was already dark, and there was a thick layer of mud on the windshield. Seeing this, Jack was suddenly terrified, so he quickly turned the wiper to try to clean it up. It turns out there was no reaction at all, and just then, he found that the skylight was also buried in mud. Jack felt that something was wrong. He quickly unbuckled his seatbelt, tried to open the door after he climbed up to the car, but unfortunately, every door was barricaded. How can he push as hard as he can, just when he doesn't know what to do? All of a sudden there are mobile phones, so Jack immediately called for help. What he didn't expect was this: the phone doesn't even have a signal. Have no way. He had to try again to start the car. Jack is going to force his way out, but the car didn't respond at all. This made Jack very angry. He began to vent on the car. His anger caused the car to shake violently. Jack was too frightened to move. As soon as things calmed down outside, Jack took out a book. He began to recall the route of the way. Then he realized that he might have been in a mudslide. Think of a people often pass the road. Jack seems to see a silver lining, so he lay down to rest, quietly waiting for the rescue team to arrive. But I don't know how long it took. When Jack woke up from his sleep, he found that 4 hours had passed. Still there was no movement outside, and he was even more devastated. There's less and less oxygen in the car. So how does Jack get out of this mess? Man was just about to open the window of his car, but the mud started pouring in uncontrollably. In a panic, John had to slowly close the window. John had been trapped under the mudslide for 5 hours. He was becoming anxious and restless, but just then, he notices a crack in the car's sunroof. John got some tape to try and stop it, but under the immense pressure of the mud, the tape wouldn't have done much good. Fortunately, he found a support bar under the seat. That's how he managed to hold on to the pressure. John grabbed a bottle of water and drank it down, but just as he was taking the last sip, he remembered that this was the last bottle of water. John hesitated, but what was the use of the little water left? John prayed in despair. He thought of his girlfriend still waiting for him. John had to pull himself together again. He searched the car for all the supplies he could use. Just then, he noticed water dripping from the broken glass. John got some card and made a water-catching device. It wasn't long before the bottle was half full. After drinking his fill, John decided that he couldn't just sit there and wait. He took out the cap and poked a small hole in it. He tied a string to it and ran it down the tube. He threaded it up against the skylight. At first everything went smoothly, but as the number of pipes increased, John started to struggle a bit. John pushed the pipe upwards with his back. Then John used the wire to push the lid open. Looking at the faint light, John began to take a greedy breath of fresh air, but his next move nearly killed him. Translated with www.dpel.com/translator, free version. Man has been under a mudslide for a day. He had just gotten a breath of fresh air. He lit up a newspaper. He wanted the smoke to come out through the pipe for help, but before the smoke could float out, he almost choked himself to death. In a panic, he got a towel to cover the source of the fire. He covered his mouth and nose with his clothes. But just then, the car suddenly started to shake again. The pipe slipped halfway down. He rushed to get some wire to reinforce it, but when he turned his head, John hit the pipe hard. The pain was so intense that he began to drift off to sleep. In a daze he was in his garage. 1 minute it was sunny and bright. 1 minute it was sunny, the next it was covered in mud. John was awakened by the smoke billowing up. John dressed the wound with clothes. At this moment John was overcome with fear. He took out his phone and recorded his last words. But when he saw the video of his girlfriend, he began to regret not asking her to marry him sooner. But just then, with a loud bang, the glass shattered. A huge amount of mud came in. Looking at the roof of the car, which was about to collapse, John rushed to get a pipe and put it up. Luckily, it was stable for now, but there was no hope of waiting. He had to try and dig his way out. Maybe there's a chance. He then rubbed oil all over his body to reduce friction. He attached the spare tire to a hose to act as an oxygen tank. John started digging upwards a little. The difficulty was unimaginable. As he dug and dug, in this small space, after an unknown amount of time, his whole body was already submerged in the mud. But he didn't give up. He slowly moved his body, with his hands and hips digging. A ray of light finally shone through. At this moment he was overjoyed. After much effort, he finally stretches his head out. This film tells us, no matter what the desperate situation is, there's always hope in your heart, and that a panoramic sunroof is useful when necessary.